The Bat Bomb Project, America's strangest World War II weapon. In the deserts of New Mexico in the spring of 1943, a colony of live bats, each one fitted with a tiny timed incendiary device, woke up early, flew loose across a United States military airfield, and set the base on fire. This was not sabotage by the enemy. It was America's own top-secret weapon, one designed to burn down the wooden cities of Japan, instead burning down a piece of America first. This is the strange but true story of Project X-Ray, the plan to turn millions of ordinary bats into a swarm of self-guided firebombs. A dentist's idea for winning the war. The bat bomb was the brainchild of Lytle S. Adams, a dental surgeon from Pennsylvania with no formal military or scientific background, but a deep fascination with aviation and animal behavior. Just days after the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, Adams was reportedly inspired by a recent visit to Carlsbad Caverns in New Mexico, home to millions of Mexican free-tailed bats that poured out of the cave entrance every evening in a dense, swirling cloud. Adams reasoned that if each of these small, numerous, and naturally nocturnal creatures could be fitted with a miniature incendiary device, they could be released over Japan under cover of darkness, where they would instinctively scatter and roost in the eaves, attics, and wall spaces of the countless wood and paper buildings that made up most Japanese cities at the time. Hours later, timers on the tiny bombs would ignite, starting fires in thousands of locations simultaneously, far too many for any fire department to contain. Adams had a personal connection to First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, and through this channel, his proposal reached President Franklin D. Roosevelt himself. Remarkably, the president approved the concept for preliminary research, and the project was handed over to the National Defense Research Committee for development. What followed was one of the more bizarre research and development efforts of the entire war, drawing in bat biologists, military engineers, and chemical weapons specialists to solve a problem nobody had ever seriously attempted before: how to weaponize a bat. Designing a bomb around a living animal. Mexican free-tailed bats were chosen specifically because of their sheer abundance, with colonies numbering in the millions, and because they were strong enough in proportion to their body size to carry a small payload in flight. Just as important, these bats could be cooled into a hibernation-like state of torpor, slowing their metabolism enough that thousands of them could be packed closely together into specially designed cardboard containers for transport without harming them. The incendiary devices themselves were tiny, a thickened form of gasoline gel, not unlike napalm, packed into small celluloid cases and attached to each bat's loose chest skin with a surgical clip and a short length of string, designed to detach on its own after the timer had run its course. Engineers designed a special bomb-shaped canister divided into stacked trays that could hold over 1,000 bats each in individual compartments. The plan called for this canister to be dropped from a bomber at altitude, where a parachute would deploy to slow its fall. At a predetermined height, the trays would open automatically, releasing the torpid bats into open air. As the bats fell through the warmer, lower atmosphere, they would wake from their induced hibernation, spread their wings, and scatter to find roosting spots in the buildings below, entirely unaware they were each carrying a live incendiary device. When the test went wrong. Testing began in 1943 at several sites, including Muroc Army Air Base in California and Carlsbad Army Airfield in New Mexico, the same region that had originally inspired Adams. Early trials using bats without live incendiaries helped researchers confirm that the animals could survive the cooling and release process and would indeed disperse and roost as predicted. But when researchers moved on to testing bats armed with live, functioning incendiaries, the project suffered its most infamous setback. In May 1943, a number of bats fitted with live incendiary devices at Carlsbad Army Airfield woke from their torpor earlier than expected, likely due to the warmth of the New Mexico climate, and escaped their holding area before they could be loaded for the planned test drop. The loose bats scattered around the airfield and roosted under a fuel storage tank and beneath several base structures, including a hangar and control tower. When their timers eventually triggered, the resulting fires burned down a significant portion of the test facility, an outcome made only more embarrassing by the fact that the target of the exercise had been meant to be a mock Japanese village constructed elsewhere on the test range specifically for the purpose, not the United States Army's own airfield. A promising but painfully slow weapon. Despite the disastrous test, the underlying concept continued to show real promise on paper. Later controlled trials against a specially built mock Japanese village, complete with structures built to Japanese architectural specifications using authentic building materials, reportedly demonstrated that the bat bombs could ignite numerous fires with remarkable efficiency, even outperforming conventional incendiary bombs in some comparisons made by researchers at the time in terms of the sheer number of ignition points achieved per bomb dropped. In 1943, oversight of the program was transferred from the Army to the Navy, which renamed the effort Project X-Ray and later handed responsibility to the United States Marine Corps for further development. Yet even as testing continued to show potential, the program was plagued by the sheer complexity of what it was attempting to do, essentially engineering a weapons delivery system around the unpredictable behavior of a living animal, something far messier and harder to control than conventional ordnance. Progress was slow, and the timeline for making the weapon combat-ready stretched further and further into the future. Overtaken by a different kind of bomb. By early 1944, with an estimated $2 million already spent on the program and a working combat deployment still not close to ready, military leadership made the decision to cancel Project X-Ray entirely. The reasoning was straightforward. American resources and attention were increasingly being funneled toward the Manhattan Project, the effort to build an atomic bomb, which by that stage appeared far more likely to deliver a war-ending weapon in a realistic time frame. Against the promise of a single bomb capable of leveling an entire city in an instant, a swarm of incendiary baths no longer seemed like a priority worth pursuing, however creative or genuinely promising the underlying concept had once appeared. A strange footnote to the war. Project X-Ray never saw combat, and no bat ever flew a real mission against Japan. What remains today is a peculiar footnote in the history of American wartime innovation, a reminder that the desperation and creativity of total war could push military planners to seriously invest years of research and millions of dollars into training bats to become airborne firebombs. It stands as one of the strangest weapons programs ever funded by the United States government. A project that, in its most memorable moment, proved far more dangerous to its own creators than it ever came to being to its intended enemy.